Part of my prep for this specific podcast was I went back and I went through my notes from when I read the book. So I have a collection of Navalisms here. I kind of want to run by you and get your take on them.
Cool. Yeah, let's do it.
But before we get into some of the ones that stuck with me, I'm curious. Besides leverage, because we will talk about leverage here in a minute. What are some of the Navalisms that stuck with you the most, or the ones that kind of hit you in the face the most when you were putting the book together?
Um, I mean, it was weird to spend this much time with these ideas because I just kind of kept getting hit in the face over and over again. And some of them, like weirdly, even when you read them a few times, like it's still tough medicine to take over and over again. Um, I mean, one that it really helps is like if you're not willing to work with people for life, don't work with them for a day. It's truly hard to internalize the fact that life is short and that you shouldn't do anything that you're not willing to do forever. Um, that's a tough prescription. Um, Another is, I mean, it's a very basic idea, but like everything that's happening inside your head is like subject to your control. And there are no external factors that are affecting your happiness. And that's, again, for the first time you hear that idea, if you haven't encountered it before, or if you are a certain kind of person, it's almost impossible to like actually grok that. But it's a foundation of so many good things that is really worth sitting with for a while, I think.
Let's kind of start there as happiness as a skill.
Mhm.
What are some ways we can develop that skill of happiness?
Yeah, I think he says both happiness is a skill and happiness is a choice. I think skill is a much better way to think about it because choice seems to imply that you should just be able to like snap your fingers and be happy. Where skill, like anything else, it has to be learned, it has to be practiced, it has to be you have to take a disciplined approach to it, and you have to earn it. I think it's a little strange to say that you have to earn happiness, but it's hard work, and it's the same way that like fitness is earned. Um, you have to pay attention to it, and if you take the path of least resistance, that's almost always like blaming something or someone else, and that's the short term um, way to think about something, and you're like giving up your agency, you're giving up control over it, and you're letting the external world affect your happiness. If you take the tough road of reframing that or recontextualizing it or finding a positive thing about it, um, if you choose to fight to have happy thoughts, you get better at it, and it happens faster and happens easier. But it's hard work to build that skill. But if you have happy thoughts, you become a happy person. You become appreciative and generous and grateful.
How do you catch your like it's how do you catch yourself when you have those unhappy thoughts? Because I feel like the inner dialogue that people have with themselves can often be the most negative dialogue they have, period. So how do you go about catching yourself in those moments?
I think it helps to surround yourself with other people who are happy. Like you become like the people you're around the most, right? So if you become like people who interpret things positively, or if you stay around people who interpret things positively and say positive things about others, you'll kind of naturally gravitate towards that, I think. Another is to externalize that, right? To your point, like it's hard to audit your own internal dialogue. It just kind of like chases itself around and echoes around in your head. But as soon as you're writing, you start to like catch that, or as soon as you're even speaking out loud, like whatever is easy for you, or whatever comes naturally. But as soon as you're writing, it's harder to lie to yourself. It's harder to like, put down a complaint and not see that you're just like whining about something that's like not actually worth whining about or choosing to be unhappy about. And it becomes easier to like give yourself advice almost.
Yeah, I found that just like, even doing some morning pages and stuff, like it's very
Mhm.
easy to kind of to catch yourself on that.
It's easy to underestimate, man. Like as soon as you do it, you're like, oh, I don't need to write it down. Like, what's the difference between writing it and thinking it? And then as soon as you write it, you're like, oh, so much better.
Yeah, exactly. But speaking of kind of the people you surround yourself with, another embolism I have here. When working, surround yourself with people more successful than you. When playing, surround yourself with people happier than you. Shouldn't you strive for that person or those people you surround yourself with to be the same? Like, should they both be people that are more successful and people that are happier than you?
I think that's the ideal. With both. Um, it's sometimes hard to find. Like sometimes the most successful people are the least happy. And then that's a question of like, are you willing to go to work with a bunch of people who are successful but unhappy, and then like run away from them when it's time to switch gears? I wonder. Yeah, I think that's an older quote, and I actually wonder if he would change that now, to like it's not worth being around people that make you, even if they make you successful, if they're making you unhappy. Because it's hard to separate that, your work and your home lives. Those ideas, as negativity, like works its way into your head regardless of the context.
Play long-term games with long-term people is the next one. How what long-term games are you personally playing like right now? Like what does that look like in practice for you?
Yeah, I try to not do anything anymore that doesn't compound. Like that's how I think about the long term games, right? So, if I write a book and put it up for sale, like that book is going to be for sale 40 years from now. If I'm finding out now if a course is the same way, like I think it is and I hope it is, but it's a little bit of a different mechanism. If I create a blog post or record a podcast, like those things may be around for a long time, maybe less if like there's platform changes or whatever. Um, but I kind of allocate my effort by how long I think that thing is going to be around, and I try to have a really long term view. I try to like, my investment criteria is like I try to never buy anything I'm gonna want to sell. Like if you buy something to sell, you're now all of a sudden you have to pay attention to it and figure out when to jump off the carousel. If you want to buy it and just wait for it forever and hand it off to my kids someday, like that's one decision and you forget about it and then you just get happy that you made it and you can focus on other things. Just thinking long term, doing things that compound, contributing to projects that are permanent, or that have some permanent edifice to them. That's kind of how I end up living that.
And how do you find long-term people?
I think long term people are they're always honest, because it's always a short termism thing to like deceive someone into, because they're going to figure it out. Um, it is a long term thing to be extremely fair and put others first. You can usually recognize when other people are thinking long term. If you see somebody starting a company, then they're like, I want to build this company forever. I'm planning. I have a 20-year vision for this thing. I have a 40-year vision for this thing. I'm buying properties with no intention of ever selling them. Versus somebody who's like, oh, there's a pandemic. I'm going to go like spin up a mask company on Shopify or whatever real quick. You're like, that's not like, we have different mindsets, right? I don't begrudge that game, but like we're playing different games.
Yeah. And the next one kind of similar, not similar to the game you're playing. It's play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Like obviously no one tries to set out to play a stupid game, but how do we know when we're playing one?
Yeah, that's probably the less or the non-judgmental version of that is like play authentic games, win authentic prizes, or like, whatever's important to you, right? Like you're writing screenplays so that you can like get a movie made. Like that's fucking awesome. If it's not important to somebody else and like they're doing it because they grew up in LA and they know somebody else is doing it and then they think that's like exciting and what they're supposed to be doing, um that's wrong. Maybe they like are trying to get a movie made but they're running around like trying to get coffee with some famous person when like that's not the game. They need to be like working on their craft and writing a better screenplay, right? So I think it's a matter of like understanding yourself well enough to know what you want and being sure that you're working on that. And I mean, like we talked about, like with wealth and status and money, like you can spend a long time chasing the wrong thing, thinking that those conflating, oh, if I have 50,000 Twitter followers, like I'll be able to make whatever amount of money I want. And like, that's not true. Like if what you want is the wealth, the assets, like there's more focused ways you can do that. If you want the status, then like by all means pursue the status. But know that that's what you're doing, and try to like isolate that and go after it.
Arm yourself with specific knowledge. I think that's a big one as well for him. Like, what does specific knowledge mean? And is does that's like, are you in alignment with that, or are you more of a generalist yourself personally?
I don't see a conflict between those two, right? Like, so there's specific knowledge is just um how unique is your skill set, right? Like we're all unique as a byproduct of our genetics and our experience and all the crazy things that we've read and experienced, as we like talked about earlier, right? um, None of us is a perfect substitute for each other. We tend to have been trained mostly uniformly to do the same jobs, right? Like that is most of the system is like go to law school, get a law degree, go get a job as a lawyer, like do a pretty uniform task. And the kind of doctrine of specific knowledge, as Naval preaches, is like the more unique you can become, the more valuable you are. So if you're a lawyer who deeply understands like the Canadian medical system and some combination and the blockchain, like you'll end up incredibly valuable in the next 30 years because of your unique expertise, much more so than if you were just like a really good average lawyer. Um, and that really, like, I think as a generalist, like no two generalists are exactly the same. They might use the same word to describe themselves as being a generalist, but if you sat down with them and started like plotting their actual skills and insights and experiences and things, like they'd be very unique. And the longer they spend as a generalist and the more time they spend, the more unique they get. And so I think those two things are almost the same. Like we are all generalists. We all have specific knowledge, and the better we understand it, and the more we develop it, the more valuable we become. There's still plenty of work to do to like find the right lock for that key that you've become, and find the context that like applies your value in a way that produces value for a ton of other people, so that you can capture some of that value.
The other one, the other Navalism that I had that I wanted to get your opinion on was there are 4 ways to get lucky. And so I kind of copy and pasted. I took a big long note about this, but I'll kind of summarize it. I pasted in here, but it's way too long to read. But when I read it, kind of and reading back, and I kind of understand what I was going for. But when I looked at the 4 different types of luck, I almost looked at it as the 4 stages of luck. So the 4, so for anyone that hasn't read the book yet, 1, you should. 2, the 4 ways are hope luck finds you, hustle until you're lucky, become good at identifying lucky situations, and become the best at what you do and luck will find you. And so kind of my interpretation of that, like using it in the context of, we'll just say an athlete. So hope luck finds you is have some God-given talent that you're just born with. And then hustle until you're lucky is using that talent and working every day to become better and better and better. And then by practicing every day, you'll become luckier and luckier. And then because you've been working for so long in games or whatever, you'll be able to find those quote unquote lucky situations because all the practice you've put in when you were hustling allows you to identify lucky situations other people wouldn't. And then as you go better and better and you keep getting better at being able to identify these lucky situations is when people start coming to you. And so that was kind of how I interpreted the 4 ways to get lucky. And I'm just curious if, as someone who spent so much time kind of in Naval's world, does that make sense, or am I just completely off in like left field here and that's those aren't related?
No, I think those. I don't think they were originally intended as steps, as a ladder, but I think they're very correlated with basically like the amount of time or reps or certainty that you have like into your specific knowledge, right? Like you just can't be born into type 4 luck. You have to like learn and earn your way into it. Um, and I think you can progress through those with effort and attention. And it's helpful really to know, as a young person or any person, that there is another step there and what it might look like. It doesn't mean you can skip straight to it, but it means you at least know that there's something to continue to evolve into.